Hello, welcome to the Birchal podcast. I'm your host, Emily McFarlane. Today we have Sean O'Meara, who's the force behind Impos and Doshi, a tech platform that integrates various apps and payment systems for the hospitality industry, aiming to streamline operations. Welcome.
That was a very good summation. Thanks for having me, Emily.
I try my best. Thank you so much for coming on. It's really exciting to have you here as a founder and such a successful founder, and obviously a great investor in Birchal as a platform.
Yep.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey. I mean, you've been in business for a really, really long time, not specifically just in Doshi right now. You've come a long way. Can you give me a little bit of a background of your origin story?
Yeah, sure. Well, the majority of it was Impos, which is a hospitality point of sale product, which a lot of bartenders, restaurants, wait staff, etc. know and know very well. It's been around since 2006 and still going quite strong. So essentially, we started that typical classical startup style in a two-car garage out in Flemington in Melbourne, and then over the years grew interstate and all over Australia. That was a big part of the journey, I guess. Knowing and understanding the hospitality landscape and learning it, I guess, back when touchscreens weren't even. There was no iPhones, there was no nothing like that at the time. We grew that to 3,600 venues, I think it was, or just
Huge.
About that over the period, and was lucky enough to sell that in 2019 to a Canadian-based company, and also it incepted Doshi. So that was a good part of the journey. There was working out the Doshi situation whilst we were so focused on Impos, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And why hospitality? What inspired you to get into that industry and improve it so instrumentally?
Look, it was something like, I think everyone works in bars when they're sort of at uni or at the end of their year 12s, etc. And for me, this is going back almost 20 years. It was really slow and cumbersome. So at the point of doing every transaction, which is essentially when you're taking someone's money, just being able to ring up the order and put the order on a screen, or create a tab or create a table, or move things around, etc. Which all sounds like pretty basic stuff, I guess, nowadays, but back then it wasn't. You're sort of talking classic cash registers were sort of phasing out, and the new school POS was coming in. And it was just time to process an order. Time is money, and how quick could you get an order done and essentially take the person's money. Was really what started Impos. Was we started in the nightclub and bar scene, then went to pubs, then restaurants, then wineries, etc.
How do you get something like that off the ground to begin with?
That was a classic bootstrap-based story. So we didn't raise. That was sort of pre the days of going out and raising money with friends and family or VCs or private equity.
Right.
It was really, we just ran lean and tried to sell as much as quickly as possible, and we had various different things, I think, that worked in our favour. We offered our own financing, which we had backed by a financing company in the background. So even though we were offering financing for our customers, we were getting sort of a chunk of money up front, so to speak, and but made it look like we were financing, and we were. We're doing all of our own financing for our customers, which the the hospitality market loved that. We made it easy for them to buy our product, and that was. I think that was a good part of our starting story, was just, here's a great product and we'll make it easy for you to buy it.
And did you always believe in it? Was that kind of part of your strategy? You're going into these various hospitality venues and saying, buy my product, it's great. We did,
and we loved it. We did a lot with it. We'd always take on feedback. We'd iterate with it super quickly. Again, probably keeping in mind, it wasn't, this was pre-cloud-based stuff, so it was all on-premise. It was sort of like looking back at the dark ages now, I actually say that. But, of course, we did believe in it. We were big believers in it. We loved it. We used it. We were believers in what we were doing.
Yeah, I think that's a key driver in it, and I often say that to founders when they're trying to pitch me their business and they say, I don't know if it'll work that well. And I say, if you don't believe in it, who is going to believe in it?
Yeah,
who is going to invest in it? So that's always such a good place to start. And did you really envision how successful it was going to be and how much it was going to grow?
No, not at all. We never really planned on moving out of the nightclub and bar sort of market. So, you know, when we started getting government contracts with Department of Defence or, you know, as I mentioned, wineries, you know, wineries were a really big part of our journey and our customer base, I should say. So no, you know, and then we went into New Zealand, golf clubs and a whole heap of things. So I think it sort of just kept growing and growing and growing. And then all of a sudden it was, oh gosh, we're everywhere, you know, and we are. And well, we were then and the product's still doing quite well in market despite me not being actively being there for 4 years or so now.
How does that feel, exiting out of a business like that?
It took a while to get used to sort of let go of it's not mine anymore, someone else is in there running it. Probably took quite a while. But I think at the same time, you know, when I exited that business, I was so focused on Doshi and getting that up and going and really, wanting just to hone in all my energy, I guess, on that. It was quite a hard, there was a period there where there was sort of 2 years of running both companies at the same time. So that was a bit difficult. But I guess to answer your question, if I didn't have Doshi to focus on, it probably would have been a lot harder. You know, you feel like you're sort of giving up your firstborn child when you go and sell a company that you've owned for so long.
Was that a strange kind of process to go through, exiting the company? Is that somewhere you thought that you would go down in terms of the avenue of the business?
Well, I think ultimately you start a business to sell it. I guess that's the vision, or it definitely was my vision, and particularly as the journey goes on, right? You don't want to be there running the whole thing, you know, forever and a day.
Sure.
I think, you know, once that business was sold, there was probably a couple of weeks of, what have I done? But it was the right thing to do. It was all around timing and in reality, I needed to sell that business to put all my focus on Doshi and also to then, you know, show the market that, you know, this was the thing that I was focusing on. All the POS competitors don't really want to do a deal, you know, with a Doshi based company that is aggregating all of the apps to connect to all the POS. When you've got someone that's owning one of the POS companies. Sure.
Can you talk a little bit around the exit, how it came about? Was that driven by yourselves or were you approached?
The exit for Impos or for Doshi?
For Impos.
For Impos, it was a process that we ran. So we, as I said, you know, it was something that I wanted to get, you know, sell and divest that asset to focus on Doshi. We were lucky enough to sell to Jonas, which is a Canadian-based software company. They were pretty quick to move. You know, in saying that, it was still a 6 to 8 month process from sort of start to finish. So that was sold. Luckily enough, it was sold just before COVID hit, which would have had a big material impact on.
Would have been huge.
Had a huge impact on hospitality and obviously all the hospitality providers, which POS is one of those. And it had also had a positive effect on Doshi, you know, and ordering apps, I guess, to that matter. So I think to answer your question, it was definitely something we wanted to do and wanted to focus on getting that outcome. Again, to focus on Doshi.
So I know that for the hospitality industry, COVID was a huge blow and it affected a lot of people and businesses in a negative way. That being said, I feel like it's impacted Doshi in a positive way because there were the emergence of other apps and software that came about. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so you had your ordering apps, your at-table ordering apps, or your order-at-home ordering apps, so your Ubers, your DoorDashes, etc. And obviously throughout the COVID period, all of those apps just went through the roof, like literally. Yeah. So, you know, hospitality went from sort of, you know, well, particularly being in Melbourne, you know, open and then abruptly closed and then open for takeaway, as I'm sure you'd remember, and most people would remember that period. And that really accelerated, you know, like an exponential growth curve, all of those ordering apps. And Doshi was sitting there, already had a number of POSs connected and was already powering, you know, hundreds and hundreds of venues at that time across, you know, the main ordering apps that are still prevalent in the Australian market now. It was a big boost for Doshi, and it also brought that relevancy of, wow, this is what this product does, you know, and it did a great job at it and still does.
Yeah, 100%. Where do you see it growing and evolving in the hospitality space now?
I'd say probably still where it is, which is connecting the ordering apps to POS. Obviously, that's sort of at the heart of what it does. Then you've got the whole menu management. So a venue these days typically is not just managing its menu, in venue. It's managing it across multiple apps that may be in venue as well. And they're all disparate based technologies. So it's around how do you manage that menu centrally, easily, from one central location, and that's basically everything that Doshi does.
Yeah, I think I used to work in hospitality for a really, really long time, and something that was up and coming was taking the ordering and, realizing what stock levels were at and then taking that into actually ordering stock and going from there. Yeah. Is that an integrative function for you?
No, not so much for Doshi. So most of the POS products would have that in their own platforms themselves. So it's not really a Doshi product set or feature set. So it's not, Doshi's not an inventory-based platform. That's definitely more what the POS would handle at the venue, which is a very tricky problem to solve, but most of them do it quite eloquently.
Yeah, absolutely. So circling back to your journey as a founder, what would you say the biggest mistakes were that you made throughout your journey, and what have you learned from it?
What would be the biggest mistakes? Probably, running yourself into the ground would be most founders would probably say the same thing. But I guess at the same time, that's running a business capitally efficient, and just really working hard to get the outcomes. Definitely just general growth, as businesses grow, they need different operating procedures, or, different, HR departments all of a sudden are required, sort of when you hit, maybe 15 to 20 people, I guess. I'm taking a stab in the dark at that one. So yeah, I think it's more just reflecting on, as the business grows, what are the new business requirements for it to run correctly, and that obviously requires additional capital, or, you've got to make sure that you're making the sales and that you've got the right gross profit margins in there to sustain that headcount or, increased operational costs.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you've got the experience, and I don't want to use the word lucky in your sale to a Big Four bank. I want to say, obviously you worked really hard to get there. Do you feel that it's still a possibility for a lot of businesses to have that kind of dream exit?
Look, I think so. I think we were lucky, so I think you probably can use that terminology, but we did have a really good tech stack. We had a great product, that the banks and payment companies realised that this is something that is quite an interesting play. Again, accelerated by COVID, yes, but that is sort of somewhat the new norm. People are very used to using those, ordering apps, etc. now. I'd still encourage anyone that thinks that they're solving a legitimate problem, that they can see there's a valid buyer for either now or in the future, to run at that. But it is daunting. It does take a lot of effort. It does both mental effort and time and money. And sometimes you are running against the stream, so to speak.
Sure.
But that's the whole journey of doing startups and being a founder, is sometimes doing what other people say you shouldn't do.
So what do you think in terms of the funding landscape that platforms such as Birchal bring to founders in terms of their capital raising journey?
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I wish it was around, I guess, when we did our capital raising, maybe for the initial raise or for subsequent raises that we did, I think it is also dependent on what product it is as to what you're putting out to market. Naturally, a lot of the B2C products go very, very well with Birchal. But in saying that, look at the Thriday outcome that they had, which is a B2B based product, obviously. So I just think it brings investors obviously to the forefront, or it makes it easier, without stating the obvious, it makes it easier for the investors to come in and actually make an investment into a company that they may believe in.
Yeah.
And it is super easy to do. I've used Birchal now twice to make different investments, and it's a very easy, seamless process that you probably wouldn't otherwise have done if you had to go through quite a cumbersome process to make an investment in a company.
Yeah, absolutely. Out of curiosity, who did you invest in?
I knew you were going to ask that one. Okay, well, so most recently invested in Birchal themselves, as you may or may not know. And then the one before that was the non-alcoholic drinks, and I wish I knew.
Sober?
No.
Naked Life?
Naked Life, thanks. That was escaping my mind. And I did that whilst I was on holidays in Bali, literally sitting by the pool, I made that investment into Naked Life.
Oh, amazing.
And it was easy to do, you know, and I even texted Matt, you know, the CEO and founder of Birchal, and said, I've just invested in Naked Life, and the UI and the UX was awesome. Like, well done.
Oh,
yeah.
It's rewarding to hear people say that, and I'm grateful that you feel like it's a nice, easy process. I think the whole premise of what we're trying to do is simplify capital raising for founders and investment opportunities for investors. So that's good.
Well, I think if you can invest in a company while sitting by a pool with a pina colada in your hand, I think that's a pretty good outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And where do you see the future of capital raising for crowdsourced funding going?
Look, hopefully it gets some big government support, or, you know, support of a big industry heavyweight that can say, hey, you know, this is now the new ASX, or the new listed way to or a non-listed way, I should say, but you know what I mean. I think it does need to get some bigger support in market. In saying that, there's lots of investors and there's lots of companies that are raising with Birchal, you know, on an ongoing basis. So I think it's a very interesting time for everyone at Birchal, to be honest, and that's one of the reasons why I made the investment into Birchal, was obviously to help out, but also to be along for the journey, and hopefully everyone gets a great outcome.
For sure. And as an investor, what kind of industries excite you?
Tech, obviously, tech, payments, green energy as well, VC fund that I'm an investor in as well. It's pretty broad. There's a fair bit that we're doing across the US, and then obviously locally in Australia. It's I wouldn't say it's a very strict mandate. With opportunities that I look at, definitely look at who are the founders, who are the people, you know, obviously believing in what they're doing and believing in them being able to execute on whatever it is that they may be trying to achieve.
Do you ever get tempted when you are looking at these opportunities on a platform like Birchal to come in as a strategic investor and kind of guide them through the process? Look,
some of them I look at. I sort of made I finished up with doing my my handover role with Doshi and handing that over to the new CEO with Commonwealth Bank last year. So at the moment, I'm on purpose taking some time off just to spend with the family.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is also opportunities that I do look at and think, I wouldn't mind going back in there and helping out strategically, I guess, as you said, but probably not to the point of going in there and wanting to run anything. No.
So do you think there's this kind of addiction for founders to be running at 100% all the time because you are so busy? Does it feel strange being out of that role?
It does. I caught up. Yeah, it does, to answer your question. There was one of our initial investors was Reinventure, and I caught up with Simon Kant, who sat on our board for 4 years, I think it was. I caught up with him just recently at DigiSit just a couple of nights ago. And he made the point to me as well. He said, how are you going trying to slow down and do nothing? And it is hard, I guess that's someone that knows me quite well and knows it is hard. And I would imagine it for most founders, to come out of a role where you're literally running flat out the whole time and then to sit back and try and chill out. It is a problem, I think. I think it's a problem for most founders.
Yeah. And do you find yourself constantly checking in on your previous businesses, seeing where they're going and thinking, I wouldn't have done that, or I would have done this differently?
I do, but I try not to, but yes, I do. And I think that's one of the things when you go and be the founder of a company and create something from inception, you're constantly going to be critiquing or wanting certain things done in certain ways or in different priorities, I guess. But, you try not to. I guess as hard as it is, you've got to try not to do that. And I think I've gotten a lot better at it, but it's probably taken me, the last couple of years to get better at it, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And what stops you from opening up your laptop, sitting down and writing an email and saying, how could you have made this decision?
Well, I guess you've got no control in it anymore. So I think after a while you give up.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at Doshi, where do you see that progressing in the future?
Look, I think they're definitely going to focus on the Australian market. It's almost been 4 years since that sale went through. It was at the start of 21. I think they'll integrate it more into the bank's product suite. Put a big focus on solving more problems for merchants. Merchants being the restaurants and the bars and the pubs that use the product. and essentially how can they connect more apps and have a bigger and better offering for hospitality merchants moving forward. There's a payments play with it as well. So to enable restaurants to do pay at table, etc. That's something that the bank's already released. I believe they've already released that into market. Just to make it more streamlined to process payments at table and that type of thing.
Often we find that the strength of a business comes from the background of the founder. So I wonder if that would be a really good point to put forward if you were to do an equity crowdfunding platform raise. So did you find that when you went to sell Doshi, that was a really big driver for you, that you could say, I've got this history, look at the milestones I've achieved in the past? Was that your strategy?
In terms of doing the sale of Doshi itself? No, the sale of Doshi was, it took a long time to develop out the technology for Doshi, and it was a hard slog. We were very confident, maybe not very confident, we were confident that the buyer of Doshi would be a payments company or a bank. Purely because of the complexity that was involved in building out the technology. It wasn't something that you would sell to, say, a private equity company. Mm-hmm. And we knew that for a bank or a payments company to go and develop out that technology, it would take them many, many years. And then I guess that coupled with the fact that, ordering apps did become quite prevalent in market. And then COVID, really helped out with the whole process of selling that to the bank. But no, it definitely wasn't buy this because of my background. It was, they wanted to buy the product because of what was happening in market, and it was a product that was fit for purpose and that was already in market and working.
So it was more buy this because it's brilliant.
Yeah, buy this because it's brilliant and it's going to save you many years and it's going to give you an advantage in market, and that's definitely what CommBank could see with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Something that we're seeing a lot of founders struggle with, and a reason why they come to equity crowdfunding, is they aren't able to get the support from the banks, from VCs. Why do you think that that's occurring now?
I think risk, right? Particularly in today's market, there's no appetite for risk, whereas with Birchal you can go and raise from, is it 2,000 investors, or is there a ceiling or a max that you can take funds from?
No, so that's the beauty of the CSF regime in Australia, is that you can exceed that 50 shareholder limit. That's right. To an infinite number of shareholders.
Right. Yeah, so I think it just, Birchal makes it easy to go and do those raises and take, a $2,000 or I think $3,000 is your average check size.
It is actually $1,600 is the average investment amount.
Right. So, and you're never going to get that from a bank. You're never going to get a $1,600 investment, obviously. Yeah. I don't know if that is stating the obvious, but, they typically write bigger checks because they've got a much more, they've got a huge due diligence process to go through. They've got lawyers, everything is very regimented when you're dealing with a bank or an institution similar, to a bank, right? So that just cuts them out of being able to invest in probably 95%, if not more, startups that may have a brilliant idea, may have a brilliant team, that don't want to, mortgage their houses or, literally beg, borrow and steal from all of their family to, friends and family to go and develop out something or start something or prove it out. It is a big challenge, and that's where Birchal, I think, has a huge advantage in market to help out, to help those startups, get up and going.
Sure. And do you think it would have changed your journey if CSF was an option when you started your businesses?
Potentially it would have. When we started Impos, most likely it would have, yeah. Doshi, on the other hand, probably would have been quite a complex one to explain, particularly sort of 6 or 7 years ago when there wasn't ordering apps in market, or 7 or 8 years ago, I think it might have been. To go and say, hey, we're going to solve this problem that's not a problem yet. Maybe that would have been a hard slog to go and get consumer-based investors, to invest in.
For sure. Obviously, you started around about 20 years ago in the business space. What would you say have been the biggest changes that you've seen in the startup landscape from then versus now?
Back then, there was no concept really of raising money. Not externally anyway, or if it was, it would be, 1 or 2 investors coming in. There was no real term of VC back 20 years ago, right. Not that I'm aware of, and certainly not that we went to try and find, that type of thing. Whereas now it's quite common to, put a value on something and go and try and raise some money, to fund it. taking in different business partners or, stockholders, etc. So I think that's definitely the biggest change compared to, the early 2000s. Makes me sound old saying that. That to me would be the biggest change. Whereas now that's quite common, and it's you can accelerate the capital raising process very quickly now. Not saying, that's not to say that it's easy. Nothing's easy, particularly when you're going and asking people to part ways with money and trust in what it is that you've got the dream and the vision for, and try and convince people that you've got the ability to pull off whatever it may be. But it's certainly, with tools and products out there, like Birchal for the CSF space, it's a lot easier than what it was, when they didn't exist.
For sure. But do you think there's an extra element of added pressure for founders who are bringing on a larger number of shareholders?
Yeah, I could imagine there would be. Like, we always had a pretty small cap table, so I could imagine if you go out there and you've raised with 1,000 or thousands of individual investors, that you're going to have a lot more pressure on your shoulders, I guess, to perform. I think founders can be very harsh on themselves, though, and definitely most founders I know put substantial pressure on their own shoulders. So I can't imagine how it would be if you had more than that and things started to go bad. So I could imagine that would be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it adds a huge level of stress to people, because you don't want to be letting your everyday person down who believes in your company, and that's why they came on board.
Yeah, I think so. But I would say at the same time, people were willing to take those risks. They're willing to back a company to help it succeed. And, I would say that's why the average check size, you would hope, is something that someone is willing to lose, but obviously on the basis that they hope that it wins. People aren't making bets to lose, but that is just part of backing startups and backing founders.
Yeah, 100%. You've been looking at other markets in other countries as well.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's helped or hindered your business?
I would say it's helped in terms of exposing me to how international markets work, particularly being someone that's not well vested in that. It's not something that I've done for the last 10 or 15 years, as I've just explained. It's so I always enjoy learning new things and exploring new opportunities. Has it helped or hindered? I'd definitely say it's helped. I think anything that you do where you're learning something that you don't already know is a great it's a great outcome.
Absolutely. And what's the kind of advice that you would give to a founder who is looking to eventually exit their company, and what mistakes could they avoid?
I think it's like timing is obviously very critical, depending on what it is that you're doing, and obviously looking at external market factors, such as what we've discussed already. It's being prepared to even to get the company to a point where it's ready to sell is a very hard slog, and it's there's only I think 3% of companies that sell successfully,
right,
from a startup phase or to a successful exit. So there's a lot of grinding to get to that point, and then to run the actual sales process, I'd recommend you bring in someone who specialises in doing those processes, because that in itself is a job. So running a capital raise process or running a sale process is very time consuming. It's very taxing. That's, as I said, it's its own job in conjunction to running the business at the same time.
Yeah.
So not trying to scare anyone off doing that, but there's a lot of time involved to run a successful sales process.
For sure. And what would you say were the biggest technological challenges for you going forward with your business as a founder and getting to that process where you did exit?
The biggest technological challenges we had was connecting a new sort of API or new API technology platform to old POS, to old technology POSs, where they're all written in different languages, different frameworks. That was a challenge in itself, because essentially you could have this beautiful shiny thing at the top, and that's what the apps loved, is that it was nice, it was really well documented, and it worked. But then on the other side of that was the actual POS side of things. So we had lots of different, lots of fun and games, I guess, in terms of making those connections work initially, but then also ensuring that they worked in the real world, in the venues, and making sure they worked 24 hours a day, So that was probably the biggest challenge, was that, you're dealing with older technology and newer technology at the same time.
And how do you become adaptable to that? Obviously, technology is changing all the time, and with the introduction of generative AI, you've got to be at the forefront and you've got to be one step ahead all the time. Yeah. How did you find that you were able to be flexible in keeping up?
Honestly, we just worked really hard at it. We had a small team, but we had a portion of the team that just focused on those connections, and a lot of it was dealing and working really closely with both sides, both the apps and the POSs. Obviously, this is in the Doshi example. And it was just being nimble, knowing about and working with your partners around different technological changes, making sure that, if they were going to develop anything out that would essentially break the development, that we sort of knew about it first and could, do workarounds or, just plan for it, which didn't always happen, but it did happen most of the time, in terms of we did get that communication, hey, we're going to change something here, and we just had to sort of work it out and make sure that we had a solution in place.
Did you ever have a time where the technology broke?
We had one time when it went down. Well, it didn't per se go down. It just started slowing down the speed of the orders going through. And the guys fixed it super quick. I think it was a half-hour window or something, which for us was, and unfortunately, it was right in the middle of our. I think it was right in the middle of our DD process, but it wasn't a material issue. But at the time, it was still something that we wanted to get fixed as soon as possible.
Was that ever something that happened with Impos?
No, because of the technology stack, right? So all of the technology was at the venue. It wasn't on the cloud, or most of it was at the venue. All the critical stuff was working at the venue. So, not to say that we didn't do, we had certain software releases where, it would affect, speed or performance, or, you couldn't access tabs, or you couldn't transfer from a table to a tab. And, that would somewhat, somehow it got missed in the testing process that was the case. So, you'd need to deploy fixes and roll them out, as quickly as you could, particularly with hospitality. It's not really something that you can have not working for any period of time. It affects the ability for someone to pay their bill, pay their tab at the end of the night. So, I think it's always just around, if you do encounter an issue, it's making sure you can get all hands on deck to get it fixed.
Yeah, I think there's a huge level of responsibility having that kind of tech that's going to be at so many venues, because if it affects service, it affects the reputation of that business. Did you feel that pressure? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if we had an issue, even we had an issue with it. Wasn't an issue, but it was like a 2-second delay from the cash drawer opening on one of the releases, and it was something to do with the firmware of one of our suppliers. But anyway, and that for me was like, we've got to get this fixed really quickly. We've got nightclubs going into service, and we've just become aware that this is an issue, and it wasn't a massive issue, but it was still an issue that you wanted to get fixed as soon as possible. And yes, to answer your question, I did feel that pressure, because it was my business, it was my brand, it was my product, and you take pride in what you do. So yeah, and so many businesses are relying on that product to actually deliver a particular service.
Yeah, correct. And hospitality is, it is all about speed of service, and that's, as I said at the start, that's the reason why we did Impos to start with, was all around speed.
Yeah, I mean, I used it myself, so
there you go.
Always really good, very helpful. I can't even imagine what it was like back in the day when you'd have to write it down on a piece of paper and hand it to the chef. It's just crazy to think.
No, it is crazy to think. And even with that process there, we'd have to convince people that were doing that manual process back in the day, I guess, why to move across to this. And one of the main reasons is you're not missing orders, or you're not, it's around making sure that the customer pays for what they've had.
Yeah, you're removing room for error there.
Yeah.
So who and what inspired every product feature that you would come across when you were producing?
Look, probably half of them come from the customers, and the other half of them would come from us, the internal team, or the sales guys, or the customer support people, or the people that were doing the installations and the setup, going, well, hey, we just did this install, and could have been feedback from the customer at the time where you're doing the training, or just feedback from the person that was actually doing the implementation. So that whole, always ask your customers for the feedback. I somewhat agree with it, but I think sometimes customers don't know themselves what they actually want. So, I think there's always a bit of a balance between making sure that you're taking internal advice from, all the different stakeholders of the business, to external advice being the customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at everything that you've learned over your career, it's been a really long time, and trust me, saying it was 20 years ago, you don't look a day over 30, so you're fine. What do you think that for business founders they can learn from taking advice from those around them?
Look, I think you're always going to have naysayers that will say why not to do something. I think, you could easily, I'm sure, in anyone going to raise money or come up with a business idea, the majority of people will say not to do it. If it's something you really believe in doing and you're passionate about it and you can see that there's a real need to solve the problem either now or in the future, then go for it. I think... that would be my, but be ready for a hard journey. You need resilience, and you need great people around you that can encourage you, and you need to be able to build and lead a team to execute on what it is that you're trying to achieve. If
you knew, looking back, how hard this journey was going to be for you, would you have made all the same choices? No, I wouldn't. Look, the hardest thing that I had was running both businesses at the same time, and anyone that's close to me knows that I look back on that, and I've said it many times, I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy, to go through that mental anguish and physical exhaustion of just constantly grinding and constantly thinking about two completely different businesses. But I guess I didn't really have a choice, or at least in my own mind, I didn't really have a choice. So I did what I had to do, and it was a day-by-day process that eventually I got through. But it was, it was 2 years of my life that was very, very hard, put it that way. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you think if you had your time again, you would change a few things around, you'd perhaps not have that crossover? Yeah, I think sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you just got to deal with the cards you're dealt with. I think, you could take the option of going, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. I think if you're fierce and you're determined and like most founders, I believe are, they're crazy, then I think you always find a way to push through it as hard as it could be. But, sometimes, as I said, sometimes it's due to lack of choice. Yeah, absolutely. So looking at somewhere like Birchal, I mean, if you don't want to start another business, you can always come and join us. Yeah. Obviously. I know Matt said. I think so, yeah, he does. I'm not surprised that this has come up, actually. So if you were to go into a business like Birchal and be supporting founders, what would your key strategy be to raise that capital through CSF? I think it comes down to selling the story, convincing people that what you're doing is needed in market. I think being super clear on what the objectives are. What is success for that particular business or product, and why. What's the why? So you're doing this because of what? What's the why? I think Birchal does a really good job, and hats off to your marketing team and whoever puts all of that information together in collaboration with each of the investments that come through. Because it seems to me, from the ones I've looked at, that it's very polished. It's, probably not answering directly your question here, but I would say that you guys Birchal's doing a great job at assisting those businesses to refine their proposition and get them live and get that money in the door. And then it's a matter of execution. Yeah, it's been years of understanding the market, understanding founders and their needs, and understanding what investors are looking for in terms of investment opportunities, I think. And I think that a huge part of it is trying to simplify the process, because you were right before, it's so hard to go in and try to sell your business to an investor, particularly a large-scale investor. If you're trying to sell it to people who haven't invested in early stage companies before, it can potentially be even harder. So having somebody and a team that can craft your messaging and your marketing around it, I think is an invaluable resource. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why Birchal has such a great place in capital raising in Australia. Yeah, is helping tell that story and explain to investors, and hopefully answer all their questions with them watching the material or reading the information on the particular company, and then making it super easy for investors to make those investments. Yeah, I think storytelling is a huge element of marketing any kind of business. And agreed. I can imagine for you back in the day, it would have been really hard to kind of tell that story. And have it from a visual perspective. Was that something that you found was really difficult?
Yep, extremely difficult, even to the point where, we came up with animated videos, as easy as that sounds now, because you're talking about explaining a super complex story, in particularly in that of Doshi, right? Particularly when you're explaining, there's all these apps that are going to come in the market that are going to have these issues. Well, they're not in the market right now, so what are you talking about? So that was a hard slog to explain, and even explaining it to people that were technologically literate, like your Westpac, or Reinventure, which was Westpac, and then Coca-Cola. We had to explain it to them, and then you'd sort of have the penny would drop, and they would get it and go, okay, that all makes sense now. But yeah, it was a hard one to explain.
Do you think that's your strength as a founder, is storytelling?
I wouldn't say it's my strength. I wouldn't say, probably now looking back on, reflecting on things, being able to objectively pull apart, what are the main things that you should be trying to push in raising funds. I think that's something that you learn along the process. So yeah, I wouldn't exactly say it's my strength, no.
When you look for people to work with and join your team, what do you look for in the skills that you might not have?
Well, that's lots, because I'm not a developer. So most of the people that I've employed, particularly on the Doshi front, were developers. The main thing I look for is cultural. Are they going to fit in with the team? Are they aligned? Do they believe in what I'm trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
I've hired people in the past that haven't been well versed in the technology that we would be developing in at the time, but they would pick it up and learn it because I believed in their skill set, or them as a person. So not necessarily having that particular skill, but having the ability to learn that skill. And then that ranges from, are you employing an engineer, or are you employing a salesperson or a marketing person, or But my main thing is, can I get along with the people? Is it what's the cultural fit?
So how important would you see people in an industry and in your business are to growing it?
That is the business, right? The business is the people. If you don't have the happy people, you're not going to have the happy customers.
Sure, and I think if you have somebody who is not going to be fitting in a company and providing value, I think it infects and infiltrates the company.
It does, yeah. It's like a cancer in an organisation, really. As soon as you start having unhappy employees, it can spread really quickly. As I say, hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah. And what do you think comes first? Is it the employee or the customer?
The employee. Again, if you're not having happy employees, you don't have happy customers. So employees need to be aligned with the business vision and, what's the mission of the business? Why is everyone here on a day-to-day basis? And I think if you can sell that story to all of your employees, then it's your employees that then need to push that to all of the customers. Of course, you've got to have happy customers, but it's very hard to have happy customers if you don't have happy employees.
Yeah, absolutely. And then to that, what about the investor? How important is the investor happiness in the whole process?
Look, it's critical to keep your investors happy. I think you're not always going to keep your investors happy because they may not understand what it is that you're trying to solve and in which particular order. They may have different hopes and ambitions, and that's something that you're trying to explain to the investors, obviously when they're coming into a company or whether or not it's a startup or a scale up. Naturally you've got to keep the investor happy, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to do that at all times.
Yeah, 100%. And it makes a lot of sense to think you're trying to make so many parties happy at the same time.
Yeah.
You've got to kind of narrow in on what your priorities are and where you want to put your focus.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've absolutely chewed your ear off today, and
That's
it's
right.
been so wonderful to talk to you. And I really, really appreciate you coming in and giving us your insight from a founder perspective, an investor perspective, and where you want to head in terms of your next direction. Is there anything else that you can give to our audience in terms of your key tidbits and what you think as a founder you've brought to businesses?
Look, really motivate and inspire your team, because when the going gets tough, you really need your team to be around, to obviously to be there, but also to be there for you as the founder. I was very, very lucky with the team that I had in both companies, to be honest. And I think without having a really well-aligned team that care about each other, I think it wouldn't have happened. So that would probably be my number one tip: is do your best to inspire and nurture and look after those that that you're on the battlefield with, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for coming in. It's been so awesome to chat with you, and I'm sure we'll chat with you soon.
Thanks for having me, Emily. Cheers.